Almost everything we learned about Mrs. Rosa Parks is either not true or distorted. Rosa Parks was not a random woman taking the bus that day whose activism started when she refused to give up her seat. She was already working with the NAACP. She was also not an old lady with hurting feet. She said out of her own mouth that she didn't tell anyone her feet were hurting. That part of the story is made up. She also didn't sit in the front of the bus in the whites-only section. She sat in the middle. Rosa Parks even knew the driver, James Fred Blake, who she had had problems with before. See, in 1955, Mrs. Rosa Parks was a 42-year-old married woman, the secretary of the NAACP and Youth Council, and she also worked a job as a seamstress. Rosa Parks had an extensive history of political activism and freedom movements before the December 1st incident. Her grandfather was a follower of Marcus Garvey. Her husband, Raymond, worked to free the Scottsboro Boys, and Rosa identified Malcolm X as her hero. What ultimately made her different was she used her experience and connections to use the incident as a doorway to start the bus boycott. Segregation on buses went something like this. If you were black, you got on the bus, paid your fare, and then you got off to reboard using the back doors. In Alabama, the first 10 seats were reserved for whites, so you would have black people standing up in front of empty seats if the colored section was full. If the bus filled up and there were only seats in the colored section, blacks had to give up those seats for white passengers. Black people were repeatedly humiliated, abused, and even murdered on buses. One of the least talked about incidents is the story of Hilliard Brooks, a World War II veteran who refused to get off the bus to re-enter through the back on August 12, 1950. The bus driver called the police and they killed Brooks. They shot him, and it was ruled a justifiable homicide. By 1955, the NAACP and the WPC, Women's Political Council, were ready to boycott and were looking for someone to organize a campaign around. They started raising money to use Claudette Colvin, but community leaders complained that she was feisty, uncontrollable, profane, and emotional. According to Colvin, Rosa Parks was the only adult leader who continued to support her that summer. But when Claudette got pregnant, even Rosa Parks felt some kind of way. The NAACP had already decided not to use Colvin, but now that she was pregnant, they really distanced themselves from her. On October 21st, an 18-year-old girl named Mary Louise Smith also refused to move from her spot on the bus, but they didn't want to use her either. Smith's family was poor, and there was a rumor that her father was an alcoholic. These rumors weren't true. Mary said that her father worked 2 jobs to provide for their family and didn't even have time for drinking. Then, on December 1st, 1955, on her way home, Rosa Parks boards a bus driven by Fred Blake. She sits in the middle section next to a black man, not the white section, the middle section. This section was deemed okay for black people to sit in, but it could be taken away if a white person needed a seat. And that's what happened. The bus filled up, and a white man was left standing. Blake asked for 4 people, Parks included, to give up their seat. Parks refused, and the rest is history.